We did transitions last week, we did transforms last week, and we did CSS animation. And now that we have all those additional things, it's like, how do we actually add this to our gallery? All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you a JavaScript light gallery. And this is the one that we're gonna be making, we use in Web 2. So why am I showing you something in Web 2? Because when you go into Web 2, we're gonna be using a lot of code that you didn't write, right? Like and that's commonplace. And in Web 1, what we're trying to do is make sure that you understand the foundations and the fundamentals. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. And we can get started on this. All right. So, like I said, right, explanation is easy. Easy. Like, type this, copy and paste this, done, 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 done. Easy, easy, easy. Understanding is the hard part. And that's what I want us to do, is really, really be able to understand this. So we use this thing called Light Gallery by Sachin Chuler. Let's see if I can spell his name correctly. We use this, yeah, right. This is this thing right here. And it's great. It is a great Lightbox gallery. You can look at it, right? See how those transitions, right? And we know from last week that these are zooming in, and we see this, and there's even a little thumbnail view that you can show and hide. See how that's transitioning, right? It's transitioning its height, right? And we can embed other images. You can zoom in like this, and you can hit play, and this stuff is going to all play through. And this is great. And this is what we'll be customizing and using in Web 2, right? See those keyframe animations, okay? How it's scaling down and zooming out. And at this point, I want you to be able to look at stuff and go, that's really cool. And then say to yourself, how does it work, right? And I always like to take the complicated stuff and distill it down, right? Designers are really good at distilling stuff down, right? First principles. So what we're gonna do today is get to first principles and say, like, how does a light gallery work? Because otherwise, this is what's gonna end up happening. And this is what I want us to avoid here. What I want us to avoid here is come in here and go into topics, right? And we go to UI patterns, and this is a common UI pattern. Let's see here. We got galleries inside of here. Oh, where did they move them to? Well, you can search for gallery. Okay. And you're just going to get all these examples, right? Like so many examples. And what I don't want you to have to do is like, I don't know how this thing works. I copied and pasted exactly as is. I don't know how this thing works, right? Or what is this thing using JavaScript right here? And today we're going to be making a gallery, right? But we're not going to be using any JavaScript because we haven't learned JavaScript. We don't know what this is. And if you bring this stuff into your project, you're adding a complexity that you don't understand. And what I'm trying to show you is like you can create something that is very, very similar to this, right? With stuff that you do understand. Okay, so we're going to be basically cooking with the ingredients that we know. That's the best way I can explain today's lecture. All right, so there's that. There's all those cool examples. Thank you, Sachin Cooler, for this light gallery here. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and close that out. All right, let's go into the Professor Pen. Let's go ahead and from the course website, let's pop open Lightbox right there. All right, so all CSS galleries, we can come in here and search and Google for CSS galleries, and you're just gonna get inundated. Like there's just so many. Like the top 49, the top 49 CSS galleries, 30 plus CSS galleries. I'm laughing. Like, why is this funny to me? Because there are 49 different implementations. There's 20 on this site. Here's a site with another 30, right? And I can guarantee you that if I went through all 49, if we had infinite time, if I went through all 49, right, they fundamentally work the same. And if I went through all 30 of these, they fundamentally work the same. Right. And the point I'm trying to make here is like what you want to be able to figure out is how does this stuff work? So let's take care of that. And this works with a very, very old concept, y'all. All right. So inside Lightbox, we're going to make a pure CSS Lightbox without any JavaScript. I love JavaScript. It's my favorite language on the planet. Right. But JavaScript can be a crutch, and JavaScript can give you a lot of pain if you don't know how it works. Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make a Lightbox without JavaScript. Okay. All right. Prior to 2013, we couldn't do this. And after 2013, it's like, wow, we can do this without JavaScript. All right, so let's go ahead and get familiar with the target selector. Okay, so you're already familiar with the target selector. Every time you go to Wikipedia, anybody yell out something from Wikipedia? What do you want me to look up in Wikipedia? Colin, it's too late in the quarter. Please don't ask us any questions.
Surfing.
What was that?
You got surfing and Star Wars.
Surfing. Oh, thank you. All right. All right. Thank you, Kayla. All right. So here's surfing. All right. So anytime we click on this, we have an article here. Look at the URL for a second. Ready? If I click on terms, it's going to append pound terms. Well, so big deal. This is actually a part of the old HTML1 spec. Watch what happens when I type on notable locations. It's going to append surfing, right? The URL. But watch what happens when I take that URL and then I append notable underscore locations, right? It takes me to this section on the page. That is a jump link. That's how all CSS galleries, pure CSS galleries work. There you go. Like really, if you wanted to get to the crux of today's lecture, target selectors, done. I can stop listening, Colin, because the rest is just styling. The rest is just to make it look cool. Okay, that's how this stuff all works. That's why I'm here. Right, that's why this lecture is still a part of Web 1. All right, so we got this really old concept of target selectors, and it appends an ID. So let's go ahead and take a look at the HTML first off. All right, so inside of here, you have some links up at the very top, and you click on them, it's going to jump down the page. So if I click on 3, it's going to jump down to the 3rd section on the page. Well, how does it know to do that? Well, if you take a look at these H2s right here, they're attached, right? So let's go ahead and put this into the professor pen. Okay, so there's our navigation right there. And then inside of there is a whole mess of content, right? And what I want you to focus on here is the link that you're clicking on is #1. That's what gets added to the URL. And then it's going to the ID of 1. So again, the pound sign is referencing the ID. And because ONE matches ONE, it's going to jump to here. And the same thing with 2. So if we wanted to make a 2, an ID of 2, we can come down to here and saying instead of ID of 1, this is going to be an ID of 2. Right, and that label is just 2. Now when we click on this, it actually jumped down to this page. How come it didn't jump? Because it didn't have enough content. So what I'm doing right here is I'm going to put a whole mess of content just so the page will scroll. Right, and then when I click on 2, notice that it jumped to 2. So by using this idea of this really simple concept of a target selector, right? Stuff that you've been using this entire time you've been on the internet, right? We can take this very simple concept and we can add some complexity to it, and we have a light box. So I think this is very cool. All right, so to actually use the target selector, right? CSS has this is what was relatively new at the time when this first came out, right? This idea of a pseudo class of target selector. So I'm going to take that off the target for just a second. And notice this is going to make all the H2s with a background of yellow. And so now if I add in the class of targets, the pseudo class of target selector, right? What I'm saying here is don't append the background of yellow to just all the H2s. Give it to the one I actually clicked on. So if I take this and I paste it into there for you, okay. And this is where a lot of the questions should be coming out right now. It's like, what is this? Right? I've been using this thing and this is how it works. Yes. Okay. Now, who's going to get the background of yellow? The ID of 3. So if I go back to the top, who's going to get the background of yellow? The ID of 2. Well, that doesn't make any sense. How does it know, right? Which one to attach the background of yellow to? Well, it's saying, go find me the target that is in H2. So in this case, right, when I click on 2, it's jumping down in terms of markup to this first ID of 2, and then it's applying this. This says, give me all of the H2s, make them yellow. This one says, no, just give me the one that I clicked on. Okay, and if you want to get fancy, right, we can come in here and add a transition property. And I so hope that Wikipedia would add something like this, because I'm constantly on Wikipedia and I'm like, I donate to y'all. I think this is a great service. I'm glad I live in a world with Wikipedia, but I never know I am where I am on the page. And so we can come in here and we can use our transition property background of 1 to make it faster, 0.5s. Okay. Now we're just adding fanciness. Right, here we go. Boom. Let's see how it fades in. Oh, I faded in too fast. Let's fade it in real slow. Let's put a delay of 1 second. There we go. I'm gonna run this again. Okay. So the point I'm trying to make here is this is conceptually what, there we go, 1000, right? And then it's gonna fade in that background of 2. And so what we're transitioning is a background color. It's 2 seconds. Just let's do that. Okay. And that's where it's just applying to just on that one right there. So once we have the target selector, okay, so in terms of markup, we're gonna, the thing that we clicked on, right? The value for our href is going to be the ID that it's referencing. So this # right there references this ID. So before I move on, are there any questions on this part? This is the crux of today's lecture. With me? All right. Normally, right, thanks, Blake. Right, normally this would be like a quiz. All right, go make this work. All right, normally in class, we're like, all right, here you got 10 minutes, figure this out. Demonstrate to me that you understand this stuff. And if you don't understand it, now is the time to ask, okay, understanding. So one more time, right, the thing that you're clicking on, right, has a # in front of it. And it's referencing something else on the page that has an ID with that same value, okay? Conceptually, that's what's happening here. This is the boring part of lecture, I know, but this is the important part, right? Like, how does this thing work? All right, so now we got that. Let's go ahead and begin to apply this thing. Thanks, Wikipedia. Donate to Wikipedia. Got a couple bucks. All right, they make it super easy to donate to them through. All right, see how here, if we don't have if the page doesn't need to scroll, right? That's just going to jump around. Okay, jump around, right? That's an old song that you all don't know about. All right. All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, so it's just moving that around. So this is what we're going to be doing on our page. All right, so now that we got that, let's go ahead and take a look. Let's go to the start here. All right, so right here, we have this image gallery, okay? And you know what? Let's make this thing even easier. Let's start with even more first principles here. All right, go ahead and fork this pen, or you can just fork it from the course site. Let's go ahead and make this thing with just a simple image. All right, so first off, we're going to have our image, and it's going to be our thumbnail. Okay, so this is going to be placehold. It's going to be thumbnail. Don't I have a key command for this? I do. I just forgot what it was. All right, so we have a simple thumbnail. Okay, and all we're trying to do in that thumbnail, right, is when we click on it, so we're just going to wrap it inside of an anchor link. When I click on this thumbnail, go somewhere. Well, go #, right? And that's going to be our target, whatever that target is. Okay, so we got this thumbnail, and we click on this # target, it's going to run that target. Okay. So once we have that, okay, well, then we need to specify the actual target. Okay, so what is the target? Well, the target is probably going to be a bigger image, right? The bigger image. So let that sink in for a second. So now we got this div here, has an ID of full size. Okay, so we got this div with an ID of full size, and inside of there is this bigger image. And what we want is our stuff to always work without JavaScript, without CSS. Okay, and this is something that makes Colin's classes like, oh, really? Like, yeah, because not everybody has a like, especially right now, right? You're testing the limits of your internet connection, right? Right now, like, everybody wants information, and sites are running very, very slowly. Okay, so this is really important. All right, so we got this image here as 800 by 600. That is the large version there, and the 100 by 100 is the thumbnail. And this ID of full size, right, is referencing this. So this doesn't make much sense right now because they're all on the same page. And what we're trying to do, everybody, is take this ID of full size here, and we're going to give it an opacity of 0. We're basically going to hide it. It's still there, right? We all know as web designers that this thing is there, right? But then what we're doing instead is going to take this ID of pound full size, okay, and then we're going to attach what to it? What am I attaching?
Target.
Target. Perfect. Thank you, Andy. All right, we're going to attach this thing a target, right? And then we're going to say, hey, turn the opacity back on, y'all. Right? Come back. See how it came back? Right? And then we can make it so when we click on this thing again, it goes away. But really, y'all, this is a light box. Ready? Here, I have a thumbnail that has a target selector, in this case, pound full size, and this pound sign references this ID column. This is the 4th, 5th, 6th time that you've said this. I want to make sure that we get this. Okay, this is the value that I specify for it. That's how these two elements reference each other. So if we can't make an image gallery of just one thumbnail and one full-size image, we're going to struggle with many thumbnails and lots of images. Okay, so I'm going to click on this and boom, there you go. So at the beginning of class, when I Googled for all those CSS galleries, this is how they work. All of them. Right? Even the ones I've never seen. I'm like, yeah, that's how they work. Okay, so this is what we're trying to get at. All right, so we got that. Okay. All right, this is exciting stuff. Now we're getting fun, right? All right, so now we got so let's go ahead. So that was our single practice target selector. Now let's go ahead and continue on with using target selectors, okay? All right, so we got this thing right here, okay? We got this image gallery. Here are our thumbs, and here are our full-size images, okay? And so let's go ahead and we'll open this up. I'm gonna go ahead and copy. Okay, you can I'll give you a second to fork this pen, save it to your collection. Okay. One day you're gonna be working with this stuff and like, oh yeah, so glad we had that lecture. Yep, useful. All right, I'm going to paste that in there. Okay, and then we got some CSS that I'm gonna paste in. All right, so how do we deal with the complexity, right, of image gallery? So we have some basic styling, okay? Right, we got these 3 thumbnails right there, and they all have an ID of full size 1, full size 2, right? And then down here there is another ID that references each of those. Okay. So we see how those are connected. All right, so the easiest way to do this, okay, is to use this advanced selector called nthchild. And for some of you that have gotten through Codecademy, you've already seen this advanced selector, this idea of nthchild. Nthchild is extremely useful. Nthchild is an easy way for you to go through your many thumbnail images and full-size images. Nthchild, just a heads up on this, right? Nthchild, this is one of my pet peeves is nthchild starts counting at 1. But everything else on computer starts counting at 0. So that's just kind of the catch. Like nthchild starts counting at 1. We all wish it would start counting at 0. But they didn't make it that way. All right. So let's go ahead and take a look at the end. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to differentiate each of these, right? We're gonna make this thing right here. This is essentially an image gallery. Okay, and the only reason that I'm doing that, this is a demonstration. This is normally this wouldn't be your gallery, but yeah, what we're trying to do is make a lightbox gallery. So we just keep adding on this foundation of knowledge here. All right, the first thing I want to do is make all the stuff red. Okay. So I'm going to come in here and say, hey, give me all of the thumbnail images and make them all red. Okay, so that's the first place you start for everything. Go give me this class of thumbs, and the class of thumbs holds these 3 thumbnails. And then I want to say, once I have everything, okay, if you can't select everything, it's going to be harder to filter down to one thing. Like pro tip, select everything first, then filter on down, because that's called traversing the DOM, and we actually do that in Web 2, and we teach you that in Web 1. is be able to get all the elements on the page, get all the paragraphs, and then go, how do I get just that one paragraph? All right, so we got this thumbnails. And we're gonna come in here. So our parent, whoops. All right, our parent is this class of thumbs. Inside of that is this, right? So what is the children of the thumbs? Well, this li, this li, this li. And then we're saying, so this is where we're going to attach the mchild. And that's probably the trickiest part about mchild, is where do you attach it to? So nth, right? And just like we have target as a pseudo element, right? We have other ones here. These are really, really neat. Mchild, and then we're gonna have to use, it's a method. So if we put in 0, nothing's gonna happen. But if we put in 1, right, it's gonna grab the very, very first one. If I put in 2, it's gonna get the second one. If I put in the 3, it's gonna grab the third one. And if I put in 4, it's gonna grab nothing because that element doesn't exist. But if there was a fourth one, that would. So we're gonna put that as 1, and then we're gonna simply wash, rinse, and repeat. And this is how you're going to differentiate all of your thumbnails. So 2 and 3. Okay. So now they're all different, but their colors we need to change. So red, green, and blue. All right, with me so far? Okay. All right, so now that we got everybody with me on this part? All right, so that's how you're going to differentiate your thumbnails. Let's go ahead and differentiate our large images. Right? It actually worked very, very similar. Okay. So what I'm doing here is what I suggest you do, right? Like just pick out one thing from my completed examples, right? Like take these really very distilled examples and just pick out one component and say like, all right, can I understand how this one piece works? Okay. If you go into these completed examples, just Command A, Command C, and just paste everything in, and it says, it's just too much. Like break it down. All right, so now we're going to grab in this this full size, right? And we see, so there is the full size image, but you see here that they're stacked on top of each other because they're using this our absolute positioning. So watch what happens when I turn off absolute positioning, right? So refer back to your absolute positioning lectures, right? So I'm going to turn off absolute positioning just so we can see this working. So there's full size 2, watch it go. There's full size 3, watch it go. Okay, back to full size 1. Okay, and so none of the elements, right, even in your lightbox, they're not there. When I set opacity to 0, it's still there in the DOM. It's still there in HTML, but visually it's hidden. Well, this is still there, but visually it's underneath something else because we know from our positioning lectures, right, that they're just stacking on top of each other. And we know from our positioning lectures that we're just using z-index to move something forward and back. So if I give this thing a z-index of a positive number like 2, okay, it's going to keep moving up the stack, right? Because 1 is the default. Okay, now if I say, 0 is the default. Okay, there it is. Any number bigger than 0, 1's bigger than 0, right? It's going to move up the stack, right? You're just changing the order. Bring to front, bring to back, right? So if I do -1 less than 0, right, it's going to bring to back. Okay, so we just have elements stacked on top of each other. All right, with me? All right, let me know that you're there. Throw up your thumbs or reaction emoji. Okay, right? So this is all of our galleries. We're just, hey, stack my full-size images on top of each other. Like hide the opacity, set the opacity to 0, set display none. Okay, just hide it in some way. Throw it off the screen, right? Do whatever it takes to remove it visually from there, but it's still in the DOM, right? It's still a part of HTML. All right, so now that we got that, okay, we can just go ahead and wash, rinse, and repeat on this. Okay, everybody have a good weekend. Nice long weekend. Y'all burnt out. Everybody burnt out? You gotta finish. Let's finish strong, y'all. Finish strong. All right. So now we got this, right? 1, 2, and 3, right? I'm only putting these colors in just so visually we can see what's happening here, right? All right, I'm gonna go, now that we have all those, I'm gonna go ahead and turn absolute positioning back on. Okay, and they're gonna be stacked on top of each other, right? And notice they're not working. We know that they're there, but they're not switching from green, red to blue. And so what we want to do here is take all of this and attach what? our target selector, right? We want to go in here and basically just attach our target selector to each of these. Okay, and we can easily do that by, now that we have all of them, we can just say, hey, grab the full size image. Okay, it has a class, and attach the target selector. Whoops, I didn't attach. Let me turn that off for a second. Let me turn that off too. Here, now getting ahead of myself. Okay, if we wanted to, we could do it this way. All right, I know it's repetitive. Hang in there. I got the shortcut in just a second. All right. All right, so now it's going to attach those target selectors, right? And all we want to do is change the z-index on that. So, but now that we have that, a quicker way would be just to select the parent, right? And that's why I gave you a class of target. All right, so we're going to come into here. There's all of our targets. They're all set up. So next thing I'm going to do is set the opacity to 0 on this. All right, so that's our first frame. So now that we know that we can swap through these, we're going to go ahead and hide all of our images. And then on our last frame, we're going to bring them back. And what I'm going to do, just like we've been doing for the last week, is don't add in the fancy transitions yet. Let's just get it working. Okay, just get it working like this. Okay, so now it's working. Right, we're swapping through, we're using target to turn stuff on. And now what's neat about this is our target selector is our last frame of animation. That's cool, because now it's our last frame of animation, we can attach a transition to it, right? And we can say, hey, make it fade in, okay? Or better yet, y'all. All right, so before we run in animate.css on this, all right, any questions so far? With me? Okay. So now we're going to come into here, right? I'm just going to find animate.css, right? And from last two lectures here, we can go to animate.css. Oh, that's not a website, y'all. All right, let me see all these animations. Okay, so we can have it bounce in if we wanted to. How not? Let's have it bounce in. So to do that, we actually need to add that in, which we did. Okay, so we're gonna go to our pen and make sure that we have animate.css added in. All right, so we're gonna need to add in this library, and I'll link it up here at the top so you can see that it's there. Okay. All right, so there's animate.css, and we're not just transitioning, right? We're actually doing a full animation. So I'm gonna comment that out, but you can choose. Okay, so the transition one can transition any numerical property, but if you want to have something with more fine-grained control, right, you're going to use the animation keyword, right? And we only need two things for our animation. What is the first thing that we need? What are the two things that we need to run an animation from last week? Just two things.
The name?
The name, great, right? So this one is the name. All right, so Annie, that's the first thing. What else do we need to know? Blake, your name is highlighted for some reason. Go ahead.
I can't remember. I was
All
gonna
right.
say name.
Name. How long is that animation going to run for? So what do we call that? How the length of the animation? Duration, right? We need to know if this thing is going to run for 1 second, 10 seconds, correct? All right. So now that we have this, we can look at animate.css because we added this in and say, oh, hey, I like this one. Bounce.in. I'm what is it? I'm about it. Let's see here. So now, and I'm gonna come into here and paste that in there, bounce in. How fast do I want that to do? 1 second. There you go. You don't like bounce in, right? Jello. Who came up with Jello? Dan Eden, right? And anybody else who worked on animate.css, okay? Or better yet, could we make up our own keyframe animation? Yes. All right. So in this lecture, I'm hoping you're beginning to see how you're progressively adding on layers of complexity. right? And how one layer is dependent upon the other layer. Okay. So to wrap up this lecture, right, and before we get into the other ones, so the next class, we're actually going to take a look at how to make a light box, right? All the components that make up our light box. How are we going to overlay something like this? And what you're beginning to see here is this stuff is using that same target selector. Okay. And then at the very, very end, you're going to be able to have something like this. So if you got this, feel free to work ahead. Take a look at some of the complete examples. For some reason, I made this thing Jello. Don't know why, right? And instead of showing a thumbnail, right, and every time it overlays, you have a click button. And what we love, love, love about this is this has 0 JavaScript and 0 dependencies, right? Like you can customize this to look and behave any way that you want it to. And then in Web 2, we can begin to, which I need to figure out if we're offering this fall. What we're going to figure out is, you know, what are some of those other layers, right? We're going to keep adding onto this light box. All right, that is it. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. All right, we good? All right, have a good day, y'all.